Welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday. Today's Tuesday, December 12th, and we are having another edition of IAEI News Live. My name is Thomas Dimitrovich, and today's session is a recorded session. Unfortunately, I have a conflict. It's not till 12:30, but we know we go live at 12, from 12 to 1 every day, and I'm going to try to be as consistent as I can. And to be consistent, I've got to record some of these. So I'm recording today's session. Today is a recorded session. Now, having said that, the focus of today is going to be on switches. We're going to take a look. I've got the 2017 code book. I've got the 2020 code book. And I've got the 2023 edition of the NEC sitting here next to me. And if you are a NFPA link user, you'll have your NFPA link open where you can get to all three of those documents and more if you want to focus on switches in Article 404. So that's going to be our focus, and you can expand your knowledge by having NFPA link available. I'm just going to work out of these three code books, but we're going to have a discussion about switches, Article 404. Get your code book because it all starts now. All right, welcome back to IAEI News Live. I was reading NFPA and I needed a drink of coffee. Okay, so here's the plan today. I want to take a look at Article 404, and we're going to immerse ourselves in switches. And I want to basically get our heads wrapped around the focus of Article 404 because, so here's my thought process here. The reason I like to take a look at an article or a section, whichever, over multiple code editions and see the changes that have occurred. In my opinion, and remember, everything you hear is my opinion. It started up here, it comes out here, but it's all from the heart. I believe that if you look at the journey that a section or an article is taking over time, it gives you an understanding, a deeper knowledge of that topic. Okay? Because what you'll see as the code panels morph either an article or sections, specific sections. I mean, for example, you could take a look at the journey of 210.8 for GFCI protection and get a picture of what's going on with shock protection when it comes to the NEC. And then that gives us, in my opinion, again, that gives us a little bit different perspective and understanding of the hazard and what our goals are. All right. So having said that, now let's take a look. Now, the first things first, let's, if you go to NFPA, if you go to www.nfpa.org/70, you're going to come to this page. And this page is the landing page for the National Electrical Code. Now, the content down below is going to vary in regard to the amount of information that is available to you. But you will notice you'll have current and prior editions, next edition, and technical committee. Now, what I want to do first is I want to focus on the technical committee, because if you click on that link for technical committee, you will see a few more options that you have available. One, in the committee overview, you'll have committee scope and responsibility. Now remember, each code-making panel has a focus, and the focus is driven by the articles which fall under their purview. I'm choosing my words here. So, the individuals who sit on that code-making panel have a level of expertise pertaining to the scopes and the content of the articles over which they have control. Okay? So, if I want to know which code-making panel focuses on Article 404, I would go to committee. Now, you could just go to the front of the book. Okay, so if you have a book, without using the NEC, you could, and I'll tell you why I always go online. You could go to the front of the book and you'll see what looks like this with a bunch of names and people's and who they represent for the code-making panel. And what you would have to do is just look through, well, code-making panel 6 is Articles 310, 400, 402, Chapter 9. Code panel number 9 is your 312, 314, 404, 408. So now we know for the 2017 edition of the code, it was panel 9. We could look at the 2020 edition. Let's look at the 2020 edition for panel 9. And it still says 404. And we can look at the 2023 edition. And we can look at panel 9. And it says 404 is in there. Okay, so we know the 17, 20, 20, and 23 editions are Article 404. Now, if I go, and the reason that I like to go to this link is because in some cases, and I can't point to which article yet. I'm sorry. I can't point to which article right now. But I have found some articles that weren't in the book as which code panel governs that article. I'm not sure why. Maybe a change occurred in purview or whatnot. Maybe the buckets changed. I don't know. But they did. But for some reason, that article was not in this book. So I always go to Committee Scope and Responsibility. If you click on that, okay. Well, it used to give me the, let's take a look at panel 9. View committee. That's interesting. They must have made that change. Interesting. So I can't. I always used to go to this, and this is why I'm doing this as if this was live. So you're learning this as I am, and they recently changed this page apparently. So what used to be there is a link that told you which committees. The committee shall have primary. This committee shall have, I think that they've got a little issue with the website going on. But in any case, that is where I used to go to find out which code-making panels had which purview of which articles. Now, I will say that that is going to change in the 2026 edition. They're already moving panels and their purview around. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 404 switches and panel boards, switchboards, and switchgear. Panel boards, switchboards, and switchgear is moving to panel 10. Panel 10. So I'm on panel 10 and I'm on panel 2. So I know that we have been reviewing some changes to those articles. So that's moving over to codemaking panel 10. In any case, If you're NFPA and you're watching, I don't know that that link somehow disappeared. So in any case, or maybe it's somewhere else and we just have to figure it out. And that could be as well. But in any case, that's where we're at. Okay, so you can find out which code making panel by going to the book very easily. And when they fix the website, or when we find out where they put it on the website, then you'll be able to use the website. That's something else. I mean, did anybody else out there go that route? I mean, that's what I did. I mean, that's where I always went, and it's not there anymore. So let's take a look at 404. Now, I'm going to bring up NFPA link, and let's talk about the scope, because the scope did change. And I think it changed in the 2023 edition of the code. Yes, it did. So let's take a look at the 2023 code change. Now this is out of the analysis of changes for the 2023 edition of the NEC. You can purchase this online. Please go out to IAEI.org, go to the store, and you can purchase the analysis of changes. Chapter 4, Article 404, switches. So let's, I'm going to grab the 2023 book because I want to read to you the scope. Oh, yea, though I read from the book of the NEC, chapter 404, I shall. All right. That's 402. 404 switches. This is the first portion of the text. It says, this article covers all switches, switching devices, and circuit breakers used as switches operating at 1,000 volts and below, unless specifically referenced elsewhere in this code for higher voltages. This article does not cover wireless control equipment to which circuit conductors are not connected, and that is the battery-powered wireless lighting wall control devices. Now, I can imagine what was going through the minds of code making panel 9 at the time, because panel 2, remember, now where did this come from? Why was this there? Panel 2 in, I believe, the 17 code, in Article 210, and I believe it's 210.71. Is it 71? 210.70 something, I believe. Nope, 71 was meeting rooms. 210.70 maybe? Habitable rooms, 210.70, there it is. It's at the bottom of the page, on the bottom of page 66 in the 2017 code. And no. Wow, do I gotta go back? Oh no, this is the 2020. I wanna go to the 2020 code. Sorry, did I say 17? I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this and see if I said 17. Go to 210.70. All right, yes, that's when we added it. So it was in the 2020 code. I'm thinking the 2020 code where we said in A, dwelling units, 1, habitable rooms, at least one lighting outlet controlled by a listed wall-mounted control device shall be installed in every habitable room, kitchen, and bathroom. The wall-mounted control device shall be located near an entrance to the room on a wall. Now, We peppered that in additional locations. We added the listed outlet controlled by a listed wall-mounted control device. We did it in 210.70A1. We did it in A2. Now let's look in B. Yeah, we even permitted it in other than dwelling units, in guest rooms or guest suites in hotels and motels. At least one lighting outlet controlled by a listed wall-mounted control device. And we put it in all occupancies. So we introduced a new technology which would not require you to pull a conductor from the branch circuit to the lighting switch. You don't need to land a conductor on this because it's just a listed wall-mounted control device that could be wirelessly controlling the bulb or the fixture. I mean, there are these bulbs that are smart, but we'd have to look at whether or not that would be permitted to do the bulb, because I don't believe that would be the case, because it says at least one lighting outlet controlled. So you have to control the outlet. You can't just control the lamp, right? So if the lamp or the bulb, the lamp has the wireless control built into it that is controlled by, say, something you lick and stick on the wall, it would not be permitted because you have to control the outlet. You got to read the words closely. Wall-mounted control. So effectively what you could do, if the unit that is turning on and off the switch is a part of the luminaire built in, then you could wirelessly talk to the luminaire to turn it on and off. Make sense? And I don't have to bring a conductor down to this listed wall-mounted control device, because it would be wirelessly communicating with that switch. Now, there were some people who just did not like the concept of not pulling a conductor to that controller that's on the wall. I mean, they wanted a hard wire there, right? So that's one aspect of individuals who were looking at this closely. So now this was the 2020 code. And so now what we can do too, let me see. Well, here. So here's the, this is a, what would you say, a picture of these devices? The battery-powered wireless device. Relatively new. The article, so what 404 did, now put yourself, now after panel 2 did this, people said, well, what are the requirements for this wireless? And it says a listed wall-mounted control device. So what are the requirements for this listed wall-mounted control device when it's a wireless device? So they went to 404, and people were asking members of 404, okay, what are the requirements around this? And the code panel 9 at the time was said, well, wait a second, you're not connecting a wire to it. It's not disconnecting any power directly, this wall-mounted control device. Now, if your wall-mounted control device is controlling a switch that is wireless, well, that switch we cover, or 9 covers, because it is physically stopping current flow to the end product. But this controller, quote unquote wireless controller that sends the signal, is not a 404 covered product. Make sense? But the switch, if it's a switch and it's turning something on and off, we know based upon the scope of 404, and if you read through some of the requirements in 404, that it is covered. So if I go to 404, let's just do a quick overview. I am going to use the latest code book for this journey in oops. Sorry. Oops. My 2020 code book is a mess. And so I dropped 2 pages, 422.11 and 422.11. I dropped 422.11. Okay, that is right there. All right. But gently. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go into the 2023 code book. And we read the scope already, and we already identified that the 2023 edition doesn't cover this. Now, let's just talk section numbers. It goes to 404.30, so it can't be that long. As if it uses every .1 through .30, then what? There are 30 code sections. So 404.2 is switch connections. 404.3 is enclosure. So you got the switch connections. 404.3 is the enclosure for the switch. 404.4 is when that switch is in a damp or wet location. 404.6 is the position and connection of switches. 404.7 is indicating general use and motor circuit switches, circuit breakers, and multi-case switches are mounted in an enclosure shall indicate in a location that is visible when accessing the external operating means. Okay. 404.8 is accessibility and grouping. 404.9 is your general use snap switches, dimmers, and control switches. General use snap switches, dimmers, and control switches. So a light switch would be a snap switch, right? Is it a defined term? What's a snap switch? Let's go to Article 100, and let's look under switches. QRST, switch. There's the motor circuit, switch isolating, switch general use, snap. A form of general use switch constructed so that it can be installed in device boxes or in a box or on box covers, or otherwise used in conjunction with wiring systems recognized by this code. I would say that's like a light switch with a box cover, etc., etc., etc. All right. So general installation requirements, 406. 404.7 indicating 404.8 accessibility and grouping. General use snap switches, 404.9. 404.10 mounting of general use snap switches, dimmers, and control switches. So this is mounting. Now, if I'm dealing with a wireless controller, now you can understand why, okay, how am I supposed to mount this thing? It's not covered in 404.10 because if it's a wireless controller, 404 doesn't apply. Bada bing, bada boom. 404.11, circuit breakers as switches. 404.12, grounding of enclosures. Ooh. 404.13 is your knife switch. 404.14 is rating and use of switches. Rating and use of switches. And there's A through F. So you have your AC general use. You have your AC or DC general use. Colars, copper, aluminum, snap switches directly connected to aluminum conductors and rated 20 amps or less shall be marked Colar, CO/ALR. Snap switch terminations. Okay, so all of that is in rating and use switches. And then 404.16 is reconditioned equipment. And we know in the 2026 cycle, all of that is going to go up to .2. So if 404 moves it to 2, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, everything through 1 through 13 is going to move, or 2 through 13 is going to move up a number. So 404.2 is going to have to come to become 404.3, and all the ways up to where 404.16 was. So everything through 404.16 will have to move up, and there's no 404.15. But now everything will move up a number if panel 10 follows the style manual. Oh, the webs we weave. So if you remembered all of those code sections, next cycle, you're probably going to have to relearn them. So 404.16 is going to go up to 404.2, I believe. 404.20 is your marking. Now, oh, there's 2 parts. So part 1 is general. It always has to be general. Part 2 is construction specifications. Now, when it says construction specifications to me, that's sort of pointing to the standards. You have your marking requirements. You have electronic control switch. Oh, electronic control switches shall be listed. Electronic control switches shall not introduce current on the equipment grounding conductor during normal operation. And then 404.26, knife switches. 404.27 is fused switches. 404.28, wire bending space. And then finally in 404.30, switch enclosures with doors. That's new for the 2023 cycle. We'll talk about that. So that's sort of the overview of the sections within 404. And you'll notice it covers a lot of the ratings, how it's installed, all of that jazz. You're going to have to think about whether it's an AC, DC, the terminations, all that great stuff. And why NFPA elected to put the 2 tables for Article 402 in the middle of Article 404, I will not know. I think they saved some space page. I have no clue. But anyway. Okay, so Article 404 switches. The first change in 404 in 2023 was to point out the fact it does not cover wireless controllers. Now, I am not going to go to, I'm going to go back to the 17 because I like to look at the changes. Now, let's take a look at the 17 code change document that was a part of the analysis of changes for the 17 code. Chapter 4, general use. Grounded conductor. Okay. I remember this. I remember this. So, here was the issue. Let's look at 404.2c. I'm going to grab the 17 code, 404. 404.2c. Everybody knows it's just for me. 404.2c. Okay, here we go. Switches, controlling lighting loads. Now what? You know, we've got this technology in. The technology that I'm thinking of are these devices that when you walk into a room, it will turn the lights on. And when you walk out of the room, it turns the lights off. So, I gotta grab 14 code. Give me 1 sec. I got the 14 code now. I'm gonna take a look at the 14 code. This is the value, I'm telling you, this is the value of going to IAEI meetings for as many years as I've been going to all of these meetings, listening to the debates and arguments on requirements. Yes. 2014, man, it seems like yesterday. But 2014 was almost 10 years ago. Wow. So during this code cycle, there were public inputs. So here's what was going on. You take an existing, how did we usually do switching? When we deal with lights, we put a light switch in, and we would bring down a hot conductor and an equipment grounding conductor, break that hot conductor, go back up and continue it. It's sort of a drop leg. We would just drop that down. We would drop the hot conductor down, break it, bring it back up, and go to the light. You didn't have to bring the neutral. It served no purpose because you were only switching the hot conductor. And you would bring the equipment grounding conductor. So when you opened up a light switch in a lot of these older homes, you had two conductors, which was basically one conductor that was cut, that you're breaking with the switch, and you had an equipment grounding conductor. And now you have to install, say you're the electrician, you show up to the house and you say, yes, ma'am, I'm going to give you your switch that will automatically turn off when you leave the room, and when it turns on, when you walk in the room, it'll turn on. And I'll tell you where I used it in the house that we had, that we sold when my wife and I first got married, down in the basement in the laundry area. I put one of those motion sensors on so that when you walked in, the light came on, and you're constantly in there moving, right? Because you're folding clothes or whatever you're doing, you're putting them in baskets. And the basket was the key. Now we had a chute that went from the top floor, the floor was a ranch. We had a chute that went from the bathroom upstairs down to the laundry area downstairs. So you just put your clothes, you take your clothes off, you throw them in the laundry chute, it went down, and then you opened up the door on the laundry chute and it fell down onto the floor, and then you sorted them out, whites and colors, wash the clothes. Then you put them in a basket, and you're carrying the basket when you leave the laundry room to go upstairs, because I didn't have a dumbwaiter that would take it back up again, which I probably could have put one in. Wow, hindsight 2020. That would have been a nice ad, wouldn't it? Anyway, I could have done that too. Anyway, so what my goal was because, you know, when you're carrying something out of a room and you got to like hit the switch with your elbow, and there is no elbow test in the UL standard for switches. All right, there's no elbow test because you're putting pressure sideways, left and right on that switch, etc. So in any case, we put a motion sensor in so that when you left the laundry area, our laundry room, the lights would automatically turn off after so many seconds. So Bobby Joe liked it. I liked it. It was attractive from that perspective, just because you didn't have to worry about, did you kill the lights when you left, and what was in your hands. So now we use that a lot more in energy management scenarios when we're trying to save energy in, say, especially commercial buildings. You walk in. I was just over in, what country was I in? I was in, got something in my eye. I was in Africa. I was in Africa, and in Morocco. And we were in the hotel we were in. The hotel, the whole hallway would be dark. I mean, literally, there was no lights. But as soon as I got close to the hallway, boom, all the lights came on. And I'm sure they went off when I left, but I never went back. You know, it's like saying, does the refrigerator light go off when you close the door? Has anybody ever tested that? I mean, did you ever put a camera inside? Does that light go off, or is it always on? There's a thought for you. Now, what's the problem with when you only have a hot conductor and a equipment grounding conductor in that box? These devices require to be powered. So what happened in the 2014 code was in 404.2, what was happening was they were using the equipment grounding conductor as the neutral. Because, I mean, otherwise, how would you handle it? Okay, you have to install a motion sensor. Now, luckily, in my laundry room, we had just rewired the basement, so I pulled the proper wires. And every switch location had a neutral, but in these older homes, you were never required to pull a neutral to that switch location. And what was occurring was you were using these motion occupancy sensors, and they were powering them between hot and equipment grounding conductor because that's the only thing that was available. And in fact, the standard permitted it. So you had an AHJ who would say, look, you cannot use the equipment grounding conductor as a current return path because that is a violation of Article 250 requirements for objectionable currents. You're powering the device. You can't do that. I mean, we're talking milliamps, right? But still, you're not permitted to do that. So in some cases, the AHJ would say, not in my county. You're not installing that product in my county because, or in my jurisdiction, because you're violating Article 250, and there are other products on the market that can be used. So contractors were getting turned down. All of these different devices in certain jurisdictions because the inspectors were like, no, I am not going to permit you to violate the NEC because it's on their shoulders too. So they would prohibit those products from being installed, and then the contractor would have to buy the right product for that job. Or not install it. If you're not going to pull a neutral down, then you're not going to install that control device. And you just have to say, look, I can't install this thing. It's not possible because the infrastructure. Now, if the homeowner says, all right, yeah, pull a neutral down, well, then you pull a neutral down, right? And in some cases, you can do that. In some cases, it's very difficult to do that. So, or you go to a wireless controller, right? I mean, there's the other option. You can't do it at the switch, you do it up there at the fixture or the luminaire, not fixture. So in any case, those were the dilemmas, and the requirement that went in the 14 code said the grounded circuit conductor for the controlled lighting circuit shall be provided at the location where switches control lighting loads that are supplied by a grounded general purpose branch circuit for other than the following, where the conductors enter the box enclosing the switch through a raceway, providing the raceway is large enough for all contained conductors. So what did that do? That permitted you to pull that later very easily because there's a raceway there. That's how they do it in Chicago. They conduit everything, right? So you could pull a neutral down through there. Where the box enclosing the switch is accessible for the installation of an additional replacement cable without removing finished material. So if you have a light switch that has where it's very accessible, I would say maybe even my basement is very accessible because I have ceiling tile. I have drywall here. I have drywall behind me, but I've got ceiling tile and I have complete access. I put one receptacle over here. I put one receptacle over there. It was very easy to add a receptacle down here because I have complete access to the walls from the top. So all I have to do is remove some ceiling tile, run a wire from my panel board, run a wire from the panel board down. GFCI and AFCI protect that circuit at its source, bring it down through the wall to my receptacle outlet. And I can staple along the whole way. The only thing I can't do is staple inside the wall. But I can fish wires in and get them to these locations. Where snap switches with integral enclosures comply with 300.15e, where a switch does not serve a habitable room or bathroom, you're not going to need to install these control devices that need to be powered if it's not habitable. Where multiple switch locations control the same lighting load, such that the entire floor area of the room or space is visible from a single or combined switch location. Where lighting in the area is controlled by automatic means, Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're lighting in the area because you're not going to be installing a local device if you're already controlling it back at the source. And where a switch controls a receptacle load, so you don't need to do that where the switch is controlling the receptacle load. Okay, so they made that change in the 14 code. And then in the 17 code, they said that a grounded conductor is generally required to be installed and connected to the switching device. So we already know that. At locations where switches control lighting loads that are supplied by grounded conductor is generally not required at the following locations. Raceway systems, we know that. We know this. 404.2c. Oh, I see what they did. Okay, so a grounded conductor is generally required. So here's what they did. All right, so I'm going to read the language that they added. And they put it in the parent text of C. It says that the grounded circuit conductor for the controlled lighting circuit shall be installed, that's a new word, at the location where switches control lighting loads that are supplied by a grounded general purpose branch circuit serving, and it has the list of rooms, serving bathrooms, hallways, stairways, or rooms suitable for human habitation or occupancy as defined in the applicable building code, where multiple switch locations control the same lighting load such that the entire floor area, which is not new, of the room or space is visible from a single or combined switch location. The grounded circuit conductor shall only be required at one location. So remember before they said you didn't have to have it at all, but now they're saying you have to have it at least at one location, and it's going to be where you do the control. A grounded conductor shall not be required to be installed at lighting switch locations under any of the following conditions, and then they have those 5 conditions. They deleted one, which I think they moved up to the parent text that says if you're controlling it at one location, then you've got to have that neutral at that one location. So I might have one location where I'm controlling an entire floor at a light switch from an occupancy sensor perspective. I'm going to need a neutral there. Okay, and you're going to need to figure that out ahead of time. So this changed. The change was introduced in the 14 code. Okay, was introduced in the 14 code, modified a bit in the 17 code because they realized, hey, what about that one location? And then let's take a look. Well, so let's take a look at the 20 code. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. The 20, that was the 17. That's the 23. 2020. 404. No, it didn't change. Do I have the 2020? I'm going to grab my 2020 book. I keep my books numbered for just such an emergency. All right, 404. If you guys and gals know Foghorn Leghorn, remember him? I keep my feathers numbered for just such an emergency. All right, 404.2 switch. They made a slight change. It said they added and habitable rooms or occupiable spaces. So they did a slight change in 404.2c. Nothing that was enough to make the 2020 code change book. It wasn't as significant. So if I look between the 17, 404.2c, and habitable rooms as defined, stairways or rooms suitable for human suitable for human habitation or occupancy. They replaced that with and habitable rooms or occupiable spaces as defined in the applicable building code. So suitable for human habitation or occupancy as defined in the applicable building code. was replaced with "and habitable rooms or occupiable spaces as defined in the applicable building code." So they just added some clarity in regard to that. That was the 2020 code. And in the 2023 code, in 2023, the only thing they changed was in the exception. It says the connection requirement shall not apply to replacement or retrofit switches installed in locations. So that exception was a part of that was introduced in the 17 code. So the exception wasn't, oh, that's okay, now that makes sense. The exception, yeah, there it is. All right, look at that. See, I missed that. Bullet number 1, 2, 3, 4. Exception was added to exclude replacement or retrofit switches installed in locations prior to local adoption of 404.2c, where the grounded conductor cannot be extended without removing finished materials. So they still wanted you to go back and pull that neutral if it was possible. In this basement, if my basement had that case, because I couldn't get a neutral to it, I could see an inspector requiring me to pull that neutral because I have the access and the ability to do it in this basement. If I didn't already do it, which I already did, because I know about Article 250. Anyway, and it says new exception also puts a limit to the number of electronic lighting control switches on a branch circuit to 5. So that's an interesting one. They limit. Let's read that one. This is the 17. There's a lot to be learned here. Okay, and I say there's a lot to be learned here because we're going through this same discussion in other areas because GSCI's tripping. And just, all right, what was the other exception? Am I in the 17 code? This is 17. That is 17. That is 17. Exception. The connection requirement shall become effective January 1st. It shall not apply to replacement or retrofit switches installed in locations prior. Okay. Where is that language? There it is. It's in the exception. The connection so they added this text in the 17. The grounded conductor shall be extended to any switch location as necessary and shall be connected to switching devices that require line to neutral voltage to operate the electronics of the switch in the standby mode and shall meet the requirements of 404.22. What's 404.22? Let's go look at that. Electronic lighting control switches. Electronic lighting control switches shall be listed. Electronic lighting control switches shall not introduce current on the equipment grounding conductor during the normal operation. The requirement to not introduce current in the equipment grounding conductor shall take into effect on January 1st, 2020. Let's look at the 14 code at 404.22. Oh boy, 404.22. 404.22 did not exist. In the 14 code, 404.22 did not exist. And there's nothing else. I can honestly say there's nothing in here that I would say was moved over there. All right, so what do we see? We see in 404, in the 14 code, they introduced this. In the 17 code, they said, uh-oh, let me see, is there a 404.22? Yeah, look at that. 404.22, new, added for electronic lighting controlled switches. So they said, hey, we got this requirement over here, but now what about the requirements for these electronic lighting control switches? We want them to be listed. So now they're required to be listed. And shall not introduce current on the equipment, ground, and conductor during normal operation. The requirement to not introduce current on the equipment, ground, and conductor shall take effect. What does that tell you? That means people had product that used the equipment, ground, and conductor. And they gave you a stay of execution, 3 years. In conjunction with the revisions of 404.2c, electronic lighting control switching devices to be listed and shall not introduce current on the equipment, ground, and conductor during normal operation. Currently, readily available existing listed electronic lighting control switches devices requiring EGC to be used as grounded conductor per the manufacturer's instructions. This probation on introducing current on the EGC requirement has a future effect. Okay, so one of the main reasons, I love this. One of the main reasons to prohibit a grounded conductor from being connected to the equipment grounding conductors is to eliminate circulating currents from being introduced into the equipment. New language will require insulated grounded supply conductors to be installed and used with the proper list of electronic devices. New exception will recognize retrofit. All right, so, and here is the picture. Now you think you got to install this thing. And you want to make sure you have all the right conductors terminating there. EGC, there's your hot, there's your ungrounded switch leg, and that's your grounded conductor. I like it. So, we saw the introduction. We saw that it changed in the 17 code. So the 14 introduces this. The 17 said, hey, we need this other section over here to address the proper installation of these products. And oh, by the way, we put this exception in, and I started reading this. It says the number, so it says the number of electronic lighting control switches on a branch circuit shall not exceed 5, and the number connected to any feeder on the load side of a system or main bonding jumper shall not exceed 25. For the purpose of this exception, a neutral bus bar in compliance with 200.2b and to which a main system bonding jumper is connected shall not be limited as to the number of electronic lighting controls. So here's my thoughts. Now let's take a look at what they did. This exception, this is the 17 code. That exception was poorly written because there's a requirement in there about the 25, right? So where's the numbers at? I know I saw them here. Where are they at? The new exception currently, oh, that's in 404.22. There we go. Exception added to exclude, and it says new exception also puts a limit. An exception can't put a limit. It was just poorly written. Let's look at 404, but I know how things get there. 404, 400, 404. Oh, the webs we weave. This is interesting. All right, so then they left it the same way in the 2020. Let's see if they cleaned it. They didn't clean it up. So that exception is probably still like that. 2023. 404.2c. Yes, it is. That can't be an exception. Am I reading this wrong? You guys and gals out there know this code stuff. Can you read the exception in 404.2c? And while you do that, I'm going to take a quick hop out to, I'm going to see if there are any changes in 2026. So as you can see, I hope you get the flavor for what today's lesson is. Understanding the journey can be a fun exercise and it can be very rewarding because you get so much more depth in understanding what is going on. And that's another reason why the IAEI programs, if you are going to these IAEI meetings, listening to these changes, and yes, you can go, I already was at the 2023 code changes. Well, go, different presenters present different ways, and the same presenter could provide different information, because here's what happens. As we present, as I know, I'm just telling you my personal experience, as I present to people, audiences, I'll get comments back, or we'll have discussions in our sessions, and I go, wow, that's some beautiful insight. I learn as a presenter. And then what do? I steal that material. I put it into my future programs because I'll relay these discussions. Now, if I look at the 2026 code changes, 404.2c, there is one public input by Eric Stromberg. He didn't touch the exception. What he is asking is that you just pull a neutral to everything. Doesn't matter what room it is. If you have a switch location, pull a neutral. His comment was 404.22 requires new devices that require power to be connected to the neutral instead of the equipment grounding conductor. The cost of running a neutral to all switch locations is negligible, and it would be easier to simply run the neutral to these locations than to figure out the allowances of the code. Oh my gosh, Eric. But I don't know that striking it from 404.22, I think you'd have to change 404.2, because 404.2 addresses the switch locations. We should just say pull a neutral. But in any case, the exception though, that language, the number of electronic control switches on a branch circuit shall not exceed 5. The connection requirement shall not apply to replacement or retrofit. That's the exception. That other sentence, the number of electronic control switches on a branch circuit shall not exceed 5, and the number connected to any feeder on the load side of a system or main bonding jumper shall not exceed 25, that's a requirement. That's not an exception. That's a requirement. For the purpose of this exception, a neutral bus bar in compliance with 200.2b and to which a main or system bonding jumper is connected shall not be limited as to the number of electronic, that should be the exception. So the requirement should say the number of electronic control switches on a blah, 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 blah should not exceed 25. And the exception to that should say when a neutral bus bar is applied in compliance with 200.2b and to which a main or system bonding jumper is connected, there shall be no limit to the number of electronic lighting control switches connected. That's the way it should be written. But in any case, I hope, I'll show you what I was looking at. So this was Eric Stromberg's, but in any case, I just I just zoned into this. I'm like, oh, this is really good stuff. So anyway, I hope that you understand or see the value in not just living in the code book on the edition that you're focused on. Understanding the changes and the journey that each of these sections or articles experienced over time. I didn't even get to the rest. I didn't get to what other areas, oh, I thought I left these upstairs. I like these better. They're wider. The other ones are like Benjamin Franklin glasses. So this is what? This is the 17 code. That was the major changes in 17. That was the big change in 17. Let's take a look at the 14. And you could see my journey as a code user. I went from tabs, and then I don't use tabs anymore. I think and the only reason I liked the tabs, but the only reason I don't do them anymore is because I don't have enough time to put the tabs on. But if I had somebody do them for me, I would love them. The biggest change in the 14 code, screws used for the purpose of attaching snap switch to a box shall be of the type provided with a listed snap switch, or shall be machine screws. That's because people were using drywall screws. That was, I would say, outside of the equipment grounding, the pulling the neutral. That was the 14. 17, continuing to refine that. 2020 404, major changes in 404, 406. I don't know about you, but you know, I don't use my books any different. But for some reason, the beginning of the 2020 code, I mean, it just fell apart on me. And I tell you what, my 2023 is I've already lost a page. I already lost a page. And it's like a brand new book. In 404 and during the 2020 code cycle, some tweaking in that 404.2c. We had some minor changes in dimmers and control switches, the general use snap switches. We had change in rating and use of switches shall be limited to the control of loads as specified accordingly in 404.14. Electronic ballast, self-ballasted lamps, compact fluorescent lamps, and LED lamps, and their associated drivers not exceeding 20 amps. That text was added in 404.14, rating and use of switches for AC, etc., because I think people were starting to see some issues with, and I know I installed some switches that were smart switches, and I had like the disco effect going on. It was like strobing because the switch had to be rated for the type of luminaire or lamps that I was using. I was using compact fluorescence, and it just wasn't compatible. Dimmer and electronic control switches. So there were multiple changes during the 2020 code, and 2023. See, here's my. So you'll notice. I mean, this book is just as beat up and used. I mean, it's been in my bag. This has probably seen more travel across the globe than the 2020 did. And then the 2023, I've already lost. What page is this? I'll tell you what page it is. It's page 125. This is Article 240. It's your taps. You know, that's the first page that went out in my 2020 code book, because it was the tap conductors. I must heavily use tap conductor rules. But in any case, in 404 for the 2023, they identified the scope change, which we already talked about. They addressed accessibility and grouping for busway installations. On busway installations, fuse switches and circuit breakers shall be permitted to be located at the same level as the busway. Suitable means shall be provided to operate the handle, so that's when the switch is up high. Switch and circuit breakers installed adjacent to motors, appliances, or other equipment that are they supplies shall be permitted to be located higher than 6'7". And then hook stick. So they were addressing the fact that some of the busway will have a switch located on the busway itself, which could be elevated. And there were some new section 404.16 for reconditioned equipment. They changed some of the informational notes to meet the style manual requirements. There is a new requirement for snap switch terminations, identifying colar and what can be terminated on snap switch, probably driven by the copper-clad aluminum changes that went into effect. There was a new section 404.30, switch enclosures with doors. Switch mechanisms mounted within enclosures with doors that, when opened, expose uninsulated live parts shall be constructed so that when the switch is in the closed position, access to the switch interior is restricted. Access to the interior with the switch in the closed position shall require the use of a tool or an approved design that provides, that's Tommy. Tommy Davis drove that one, so that's the tool. And I think those were all the changes in 404. All right. So I think we had a little bit of a deep dive. I've got some code books to put away now. We had a little bit of a deep dive, at least, on Article 404 for switches. I'm hoping you got something out of today's session. I don't know what else there is to say. But please become a member of IAEI. Don't forget to keep going to your IAEI meetings, reviewing code changes multiple times during the year or during that cycle is not a bad thing. Watching a presentation on an older code edition is not a bad thing. Get your perspective. Take a look. Take your code books out. Look at the journey of different sections that you care about and different articles that you care about or that you're reviewing to get a better understanding of the requirements in those articles or in those sections. All right, or first level subdivisions. If you want to understand 210.8b, other than dwelling units, go back to your code books, take a look at what the journey has been. When was it introduced? Why was it introduced? Where were the GFCI requirements before 210.8b hit the streets? That gives you a better grasp of the requirements for your applications. Not just to meet the code, but if you think about it, we want to build safe systems, and sometimes going above and beyond the bare minimum requirements of the National Electrical Code are a good thing. All right. Alrighty, so thank you for hanging in there for an hour and 6 minutes or an hour and 7 minutes. Thanks for what you do for the electrical industry. I hope you got something out of this session. Thanks for what you do for electrical safety. And remember to stay safe. And please, stay healthy. See you next week. Same time, same channel.